Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm here with the 5 steps to leaving a toxic environment, the Christian edition. So, if this is your first time seeing all of this, welcome. If you have viewed the other part of the series that just spoke very generally about just different toxic environments in general, welcome as well. Welcome back. And so I'm going to, some of the things that I'm going to talk about in this Christian edition, it are things that, were also mentioned in the previous coaching series. So you might hear some repeats, but this is very much tailored to anyone who has experienced things like spiritual abuse, or even if you've been a witness to it, because I think that that's actually very important. And that's one of the points I'm going to get to as well as I do this series. But if you've experienced or witnessed spiritual abuse, if you've dealt with any sort of church hurt or trauma, just some of those things that even if you might be out, it's following you. And also for those that are at a crossroads right now about you're seeing certain things and you're trying to figure out like, well, what do I do now? I can't. My spirit is not settled, but what do I do? And so that's what this series is really inspired from. So throughout these, I'm going to be mentioning some things about myself because the things I present to you are things that I've dealt with personally to some degree. So I'm just going to get into it. So the overview video will go through the steps and the different definitions, but I do like to reiterate it in every video just as a good refresher. So the 5 steps in general to leaving a toxic environment, is number 1 is realization. So being able to see what it is that you're experiencing, what are you noticing, just objectively, without any excuses and backstories added. 2 is being able to agree with change. So once you realize, okay, this is not where I need to be, that you're going to now take it from thought to like, okay, I'm ready to be in go mode and do this in action. 3 will be visualization about like, okay, if this is not what you want, what does it look like, and all those details. 4 is your game plan, so just mapping out the practicals. And step 5 is when you actually implement it, which is like the hardest of the 5 steps, if you ask me. So that's an overview. Step 0 is an extra step that I mentioned, and it's not, the reason why I call it step 0 is because it's a little bit different, where it's not, you're not going from step 1 and then step 2, step 3, so on and so forth. It's not in phases. Step 0 is really like a continuous thing. So again, that step 0 video is there. I will talk about it to some degree while doing this series, but just wanted to put that as a refresher. But yeah, go ahead and watch that overview video if you want some more in-depth things on that. But step 1, Christian edition. So when you are in a toxic church environment, aka a cult, there will be certain signs that you may see. So what I'm going to list out is actually something that is reiterated from the previous video, but it's, again, everything within this context. So I want you to do this test with me and see if you notice this. But one of the things in my experiences where this is the idea that you feel like you're walking on eggshells. So that's one indication. So within a cult, there's this pressure to comply with the system. You got to get it right. And there's a fear of what might happen if you don't get it right. So, you know what I mean? These are pressures that really are very, very hard to abide by. And so the idea that you have to be at everything, do everything. And if you're not here, like, where are you? You know what I mean? And so it's just like the room for error is very, very small. And it makes a lot of us kind of feel like, just like we're tense. That's the word. You feel very tense. and trying to do these different things. And I kind of jumped ahead, right, about the one of the indicators being that you're wanting to do right by this, right? So that those kind of go hand in hand. You're walking on eggshells because you want to do right by the system or by your leaders, right? And there's a because typically there is a consequence to this. If you do not do something, what might happen to you? You know, you might get the silent treatment. You might someone might accuse you of not being spiritual. Like, you know, they'll kind of try and gauge your spirituality because you didn't do something, or call you essentially, without calling you lazy, they would be, it's just like you being lazy if you're, you know, if you decide to opt out of something or not do something, right? So there's those things. The third thing is also this idea that you must accept these behaviors from your leader. So there's a particular power dynamic where somebody with a title, in a sense, it's almost as if they're permitted to treat you however they want to, or speak a certain way, right? But if you were to do that, right, if you were to make a mistake and act out of character, you know, there's a lot of criticism for that. There's not as much grace, but there seems to be a hyper grace given to the leaders. It's just like, oh, just pray for them, just pray for them. And of course, yes, prayer is effective, and it's good to pray for people. But at what point, you know, do you get to actually have an honest conversation and say, and allow accountability to be held on that leader, right? So when you're just like a member that may not hold a high position in this hierarchy, what happens is that, you know, everyone expects you to be accountable, but the same measure is not used for the leaders, right? So that's another indication, right? And again, because they act out of character, they might say something to you crazy, like maybe they're not like yelling at you. I think there are people and there are leaders that are just like, they don't have the best emotional regulation. That's the best I'll put it. They don't have the best emotional regulation. And so it could actually be a very fierce behavior towards you. But again, the system would pardon that, and you have to kind of take it, but you can't return that same energy. And again, scripturally speaking, you don't have to, you shouldn't, right? You don't have to take what they're doing, but you do not have to return wrath for wrath. Okay. So, you know what I mean? So I'm not encouraging any sort of vengeance, but if you were to have a moment, right, because we're all human, and you did the same thing, you are not afforded the same type of pardon, right? So that could be another indication. Next, what I've observed in my experience is that no is not an acceptable answer. You know what I mean? The no must be followed with a because. I have learned and have now been encouraging people that I come into contact with, whether in face to face, in person, or if they're working directly with me or getting advice from me directly, or in this content, that no actually is a complete sentence. In a cult, that's just not the case. You know, in these spiritually abusive spaces, that's just not the case. You have to have a reason, like you would have to be physically unable, or in my case, I was somebody who did a lot. Like I was always doing everything, because by nature I am someone who likes to serve, and I'm also just a problem solver. You know what I mean? If I know that there's a problem, I'm going to see like what's within my capacity to meet the need. So that's just me by nature. So that's why, where I came from was able to get some good years out of me, because it's just what I do. I'm a servant. So, you know what I mean? So like, if you're anything like me, where you were already conforming to the system and you were just like giving your life to it anyway, if you happen to say no, it would have to be like, oh yeah, well, I'm already serving with this ministry or that ministry or whatever. And they'll be like, all right, cool. At that point, they'll be like, all right, we already getting something out of you. You know what I mean? So to speak. So, but if you didn't have enough going on and you're just tired, or or there's just other things you'd like to do, that just isn't okay. There was this expectation that the kingdom must come first. And so I don't know what the terminology might be for the space that you're in, but that was the terminology that I heard in the previous congregation that I was in. It was just like, oh, putting the kingdom first. So all this stuff was just like, you were guilt tripped in a sense. And again, that was one of the ways that someone could try to gauge your spirituality. And I just something just popped in my head right now. I just want to make this disclaimer, or just put out here that, because these videos, content like this is always really tricky. And, some people might be tempted to say, well, that wasn't everybody. It's not, but the system itself is kind of set up that way. So again, I'm not saying this as to say like every person in my congregation or yours was bad. There are definitely people who try, but there's enough people who perpetuate it where like this is the norm, this is the standard. So I just wanted to put that out there to say, in general, this is just how it is. There might be some outliers. I mean, in a sense, I was an outlier. Once I started to, not want to completely conform, even I was kind of figuring out how to make things less burdensome for others. But again, it wasn't enough to, like, the system was the system. So I just took some time to put that out there. It just came to mind. So anyways, going back, just so I don't lose track of what I was saying, these were one of the things that they would, that somebody could use to gauge your spirituality. You know what I mean? So if there was a need somewhere, you just said no, that wasn't acceptable. The same thing with if you coming to everything was a similar thing. Where are you? The idea that you were working or that you had another commitment wasn't really good enough, because it was just like, this is the family of God. You must put them first. Everything else must be on the back burner. And, this really short thing isn't my direct experience, but again, it's something that I have seen or noticed or heard, is that there were times where some people were even instructed to, give up a job opportunity or something of that nature if they couldn't be there anymore. And whether that's right or wrong, I'm gonna leave that to y'all to judge. Your priorities are your priorities. So like I'm not judging nobody who decided to do that or lack thereof, but the problem with that is that somebody tried to dictate that for them. And if they did not give up this thing, or did not, let that thing go, to be all in for this environment, then it was, again, a judgment call was made about your commitment to God. It is not just like, oh, like this space, but they would equate it to mean that meant something that you were lacking in your relationship with God, right? So I hope that made sense. I was trying to do my best to, because there's just way too much to talk about on this topic. So I'm doing my best. The next part is them being able to, which kind of goes up to the hyper grace thing, right? Where they can act a certain way or whatever. It's just like they are able to speak to you however, right? All the ways in how they behave towards you, and it's permissible amongst the leadership camp, unfortunately. And even if there might be one person or two who says, homeboy was wrong, leader homeboy was wrong for talking to this member a certain way, who's is there enough contesting that you could keep that leader accountable, or or that like something, some real repercussions would happen, right? So there was not any meaningful change, if any. The most that you might have gotten is someone willing to give you, a napkin and pat you on the back. And that was just really it, figuratively or possibly literally. And once again, right? If you were to return the energy, not only is that just like, a one-on-one, like, thing, but people would eventually hear about it. And it's like it ends up, in some cases, you could end up having like a mob. There's a mob against you now, where it's not, and I actually had this happen to me. It wasn't a mob, but like it could be bigger, but I remember that I'm not one to really get crazy unless I'm really, really pushed there. But even when I'm pushed, God has really been helping me a lot with being able to manage my emotions well. And so I remember having a conversation one time, and I disagreed. With the leader, and there's like a mosquito in here. Okay, well, maybe it's not. Okay, no, we good. Sorry, wow. But there was actually somebody who we didn't agree. And what happened was that afterward, I received the silent treatment from this person. The person they were married to also gave me the silent treatment. And I was trying to rationalize the whole time. I was like, wait, could this be? And then there were certain things that I was doing, certain service things, ministry things that I was actually pulled out of shortly following that conversation, after I said that I didn't agree, and after refusing to have a follow-up and saying, I think this is one of the situations that we're going to have to agree to disagree. So while it wasn't necessarily I guess me being pulled out of certain ministry things might have been a mob. So anyways, just so that I'm not rambling, these are some of the things that could happen to you, is that you might not be in the wrong, but someone is using their power, all because you did not listen to them or receive what they said well. And now here is the repercussion. And the thing about that instance, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, that this is like an offline story if anybody actually is curious to know, and if I feel like I should share. But the thing about that too is that there was actually part of what this person told me that I actually heeded. So the thing about me is that I take time to listen. Even if I might not agree with somebody, I take time to listen, and I dissect and say, okay, maybe I might not agree with their position, but what type of things were actually agreeable? Like, I try to, like, I do that sort of thing. And so there was actually some of the things where I'm like, okay, I think that what this person said here, let me actually be careful for that, because maybe I don't like the way that she may be advising me to go about it. I think that that's something I should be aware of. So, you know what I mean? So despite that, and letting that be known that, like, hey, I actually heard you on XYZ point, although I don't agree with you completely, it just didn't even matter. So again, some people know this story. They believe I'm right, but no one stood up. You know what I mean? And you might find that in your experience, that someone's ego gets hurt and they use their power to now suddenly shut you down. Also, that you are taught never to do that ever again. That's the signaling, right? Just to put you on game for that. Some people, even though they don't believe this, right? The mob might even say that, like, you were disrespectful. You shouldn't have said that to them. It's just like, did you not see, or did you not know how they was doing me though? Like, you know what I mean? So the mob, right? And I mentioned this in the first iteration of this series, but that if this is long standing enough, if you're in an environment like this for long enough where you feel so much pressure, you end up facing health problems. This can be mental health, this can be physical health. For me, it wasn't the physical part as much as it was mental. When it came to being here, because I'm just gonna say straight up, like, I was arguably one of the happiest cult members of all time. I was. Like, because I believed, I said, oh, this truly must be the family of God. I was giving it my all. I was giving it the best I could. There were certain things that I was like, it was hard for me to do, you know, because, yeah, it was really hard. It was hard for me to do because, they wanted, when you're in these type of environments, they want it to grow, right? And I've got I've got theories as to why that is, but that's not what this video is about. Or maybe we'll see if I talk about it. We'll see if it's relevant. I'm just doing this with the hand of God on me. I'm like, I want God to lead this because I'm like, I'm not trying to start no drama on here. I'm just trying to educate y'all, just like he had to educate me. So, you know, so I was a happy cult member because I believe, like, I mean, when the thing is that when I believe in something, you gonna see some high quality stuff out of me. So I did not think to myself, okay, I was in a cult. I mean, I grew up going to this place, and so I was just like, I was like, oh wait, will you want me to go, boss? Yeah, I got you, man. So again, you're not talking to somebody who left out of bitterness. You're talking to somebody who just like realized, oh snap, like it just happened one day where God had to just show me like, oh snap, this ain't right. Some of the stuff that they're asking, these principles that are in place, these constructs just isn't right. And it didn't matter that it happened directly to me, but because it was within the system, right? And so that's the thing, is just like, it might not have been directly to me, because again, I'm fairly agreeable. I can count on one hand how many disagreements I've had with people. I'm very, like, you know what I mean? I was impressionable. I was agreeable. I always sought to make it work. That's why I was the best cult member up in there, arguably. Who was better than me? I was slaving. Oh yes, boss, massa. Whoo, I tell you. So, anyways, I can never be serious with these. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna get my life. All right, we get my life together. But anyway, anyways, yeah. So I'm like, nothing wild happened. It's just like I just realized, oh snap, like this system can be and actually is oppressive, just in general. That's a general statement. You know what I mean? So anyways, the point that I was trying to make is that I didn't get the physical stuff, but it was the mental stuff. Again, though I was happy to do it, I felt pressure. And I wanted to do everything right. And it didn't help that, like, outside of church and just like how I was as just within my family, that I also was just the people pleaser. I was just like, you know what I mean? So I would just like people pleasing times 500 now that I'm in a place that I believed was the family of God. You know what I'm saying? So it just like, so I felt that pressure. I need to be great. I need to do this. And so I guess it really, in hindsight, it's this hunger for validation and for approval. And, and that's really a lot of members in places like this are really struggling with, that your worth is measured by these metrics and by this rubric. And how many people did you invite? How many people did you were you able to get into a Bible study and baptize into becoming members? When's when's the last time you went on a prayer walk, and when's the last time it just all this stuff. All this stuff. You know what I mean? And it gets quantified. And if you don't hit these certain things, then you start to think about yourself. You start to come into you end up coming out with anxiety and depression. Those are one of the biggest ones, among others. But those are one of the big ones, because this defines your worth. And this is very, very, it is very hard, especially because if you truly believe that where you're at is God's church, right? If you really believe that where you're at is God's church and you are being measured by this metric, you now think in your mind, wow, because I didn't do X, God must not love me. You see how poisonous that is? You know what I mean? And so I didn't know I was going to get this deep on the step one. I have notes in front of me, and I just kind of, it's popping now. But you see what I'm saying? So these are the things, right? And then another thing is that your sense of self is lost. You're just part of the system. You're kind of just a number, right? And one of the huge critiques that I gave one of the leaders as I was heading out is that I critiqued the shepherding. I said, they're not like, people need y'all and you're not shepherding. And so I've heard this term because I've over time I've began to be very intrigued by personality disorders. And one of the things that came up on this topic when thinking about it was the term love bombing, right? So in a sense, there's all this investment that was given to you at the very beginning when you weren't a member. Like maybe you have been there all your life, you've been attending, but you really didn't engage to the fullest extent that you could. Or if you were invited, they wanted to do all this stuff to make you feel at home. They wanted to get to know you. They wanted to spend time with you and whatever. And then all of a sudden, now the end goal, which was you becoming a member, and now that's kind of pulled back, especially if you've been a member in where you're at for some time, you kind of get put to the wayside a little bit. So, it's just, so even within that, right? You're like, people aren't paying attention to you as much anymore, one, but also two, there's now that you're in it, there's an expectation for you that you must do ... This is how unity is brought about. This is how the congregation has to function. You're given all this stuff, and so it's not about you anymore, right? And again, when it comes to faith, like there's definitely a share of this is you have to take take ownership of your relationship with God first and foremost. But there are but again, God also does desire community. So, but it's just there's this overemphasis of community and what you have to do for the congregation and whatever, that you now are just kind of part of this system. You're just part of the way it rolls. You're just a cog in the mechanism, right? So you now lose yourself. Sometimes something that I've observed over time is that people began to speak like one another. And I'm not, there's certain, church lingo. I'm not mad at that or whatever, but it came to a point where there were certain people that if I closed my eyes, I couldn't tell who it was talking. Like there's a cluster. There was a cluster of people. I think I noticed it more with the women, but there were some men too. But there's a cluster of people where the inflections and the way that they spoke and the way they said certain things and the tone, all those, it's just like, I can't tell you apart from like 5 other people if I closed my eyes. And that's like again, I'm not saying that they're not individual people or whatever. It just was something that I noticed. And again, that's how it is when you're in the fold like this. When you're in deep, sometimes you end up modeling yourself by the person who teaches you or whoever is most highly respected, and you become that person. So that's another part of another subcategory of this point. And then ultimately, you feel like your autonomy is lost. Again, everything about this place, you know, is your identity. And it's in a when you really take time to think about this, and it doesn't take very long. You just need to sit down somewhere for 1 minute. If you can sit down for 1 minute, you will realize this, that you are actually isolated from the outside world. These places have a tendency to isolate you from the outside world. It becomes an us versus them type of thing, you know. And if ever you want to engage with somebody on the outside, there's something attached to that. It's got to be what was the word that someone told me one time? I think the word was either meaningful or purposeful. I want to say it was purposeful. That if I went to go visit, even if I went to go visit another church or spend time with somebody different, there had to be purpose in it. It had to be a, you know, can I share my faith with them? Can I bring them into a Bible study? Can I do something? So that was the one permissible moment where, okay, I can go and be with family or be with friends or just, you know, kick it with somebody if there was an event or something going on like that. So, but very much this takes over your life. You're expected to do everything and anything with this congregation, you know, and it's just like, it's not like you're forbidden from being with them, but it's just like there's just so much of your life that surrounds this community, and it must be done with this community. And your congregation might have even taken the word family and applied it to this, which, you know, that's the church, like God's church is a family, yes. But because there's a twisting of doctrine and scripture and all this stuff, and they have now labeled this toxic environment family, they're now saying like, oh, well, you know, family sticks together and family does this and whatever. And it's just like, now you don't even give to your actual family. And some people might have reasons for why they're detached from their physical family or not. That's just that's a whole nother subject that, you know, I'm just not even going to touch. But they take you away from these other places to adopt you in here, and now you give your all to this family. So I have gone way longer than I thought I would. I thought this would be short, but I guess there's just so much to talk about. So maybe you felt that some of that resonated with you. I'm pretty sure at least one point did. You might find that there's more. But again, if I were really to go through everything, we'd be here for a very long time. But again, we've got 4 other steps to go through. But I just wanted to go through that part of these are the things that you want to realize. And when you realize what's actually going on and you don't let things like your own emotions or the reason why somebody would even do anything to you to come into all of this, and you're able to just see this objectively, see what you're going through, experiencing, or see what's going on around you, because that's also very important. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as I dive into this and talk more about my story. But when you realize this stuff, you have to say to yourself, oh no, this is not okay, right? So that's it. I hope that all made sense. I try to organize myself and I try to be professional, and there are times where I make myself laugh, or, you know, and so these are quite informal. So I hope that that's a good thing, that, you know, you can just kick up a chair and just act like I'm your crazy cousin or something, you know, so But this is step one. So we're going to keep going. Let me know what you think, how this has helped you. Anything you want to add in the comments, like, share, subscribe for anybody who may need to hear this. Try and get this out. And I will have my information down below in the description should you need to contact me personally, just to give me any feedback if you want to, if you'd want to do any one-on-one coaching with me as well. So I'm going to have different info there. You can go ahead and get that. I also wrote a book that talks about these 5 steps, and I dive into what I'm talking about here. So the book is Guide to Freedom, Exiting Toxic Environments and Cults. So this is right up that alley, and you can see more on that even before I get to it on these videos. But I will see you next time. And again, like, share, subscribe, connect with me, the whole 9, and let's keep it rocking. See you next time.